You're listening to the Manifest Your Greatness podcast, and this is episode number 81. Hi, friends. I'm Curtis J. Washington. And look, the purpose of this podcast is simple. We are constantly being bombarded with messages like, we could be happy if only we had a particular thing, or we could be successful if only we made X amount of dollars, or we could be at peace if only so-and-so loved me. These messages are not only disempowering, but also they are simply not true. This is because it's not about where you are and where you want to be. It's about who you are right now and who you wish to become. Once you know what the ideal you looks like, then you will automatically start becoming aware of what steps you can take right now to move in the right direction. And the goal of this podcast is to help you look within and discover all the love, all of the beauty, and all of the unlimited potential that you already possess, and for you to set it free for you and for the world to see. Welcome to the Manifest Your Greatness podcast. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this episode of the Manifest Your Greatness podcast, where we explore practical and actionable steps that you can use to help manifest the greatness that you already possess deep inside. And today, our special guest is Rev Mary Martin. And Mary holds a Bachelor of Theology degree and Master of Divinity degree. She is also a certified Crone, a retired pastor, educator, entrepreneur, human rights activist, and author who currently resides in Central America. Her most recent books available on Amazon are It's Over, I've Had It, Stop Calling Me a Girl, Lifestyle Thoughts for the Journey, and her most recent book was just released in June, entitled The Seamstress, a Dystopian Tale. Mary's lifelong mission, which she defines as catch the vision now, is to help you accept your beauty, talent, and giftedness for your illustrative life. Reverend Mary Martin, welcome to the Manifest Your Greatness podcast.
And I am so happy to be here. And I thank you so much for this opportunity to chat with you, to get to know you better, and to share with you and your audience.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time. And we have so many really exciting things to talk about. You have done so many wonderful things. You have so many things in progress. But before we get started, I just wanted to, when your introduction, it mentioned that you are a certified crone. And I was wondering, that might be a new phrase for our audience today. Would you mind explaining what that means?
Yes, and the word is old, but the association has been lost. You notice that sometimes men will call their friends cronies, my cronies for friends,
Right.
which is okay. But for women to be called a crone, the attitude is that she's a washed up old woman of no further use to anyone. Which is very far from the truth and not the original meaning. The meaning for crone is crown. And um, the crown signifies dignity, power, strength, nobility, which has been lost in modern day society, especially on women as we age. And many or some women have decided that we want to reclaim that word and reclaim our heritage. We are even taught to um, dissuade and prolong our youthfulness, to dissuade our older years, to dissuade being called old
Mm.
because it's supposed to be derogatory. For women or anyone, we need to look forward to those years when we are the most free, We have had the most experience. We've learned from a wealth of experiences and have knowledge that we didn't have when we were younger.
Yeah.
Women who are uh, premenopausal have been trained to not look forward to that because it signifies you're getting old, you're being washed up, and also even menstrual has been called that cycle has been called a curse. So there are attitudes that have not helped, have not served women well. So we want to embrace all that we are, realizing that once we reach the period of premenopause, when there's no more babies happening there, we still enjoy life. We still enjoy sex. We still enjoy relationships. And we should be thankful that we are free now to be bold, to be who we are without those encumbrances. So we can look forward to that. When I became postmenopausal at age 55, so women came to me and said, do you understand the concept of Cronehood? And I said, no. And they took me in, and with a period of introspection and analysis, this group surrounded me. And after a period of many months, a public ceremony was held. And four women and girls from age 12 and up, where I was crowned a crone. My mother was there. She came from a different state, and she was never invited, of course, to anything like that. She was very moved when I was introduced by not my patronage, but my matrilineage. So I'm a descendant of my mother, named my grandmother, named my grandmother, my aunts, named them, uh, named my sisters. And it was something that she never, ever, ever experienced because she was raised in a time when she had to take my father's last name, when she could not own property. Property could not be in her name. She could not have the education that she wanted. She could not have the career that she wanted. So this was not only moving for me, but for my mother and for the young women, young girls, age 12, who never dreamed of this day coming for them. So it was a whole new mindset. And thank you for asking. Also, I want to commend you, Curtis, because so many do not invite an old woman on their podcast.
I'm just fascinated. Well, I mean, it's their loss. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. The older that I get, the more that I realize that there's so much wisdom that we dismiss from our elders, and especially, as you were saying, women who are older. And I think there's so much of a, there's so much information and there's so much knowledge available that is being discounted. And I really hope that people, see this podcast and listen to your story. And we're going to get into a lot more. But um, if you do not have the hindsight and the experience, how can you expect to uh, approach life in a way that where you feel like you have the necessary education, not only to be a participant in humanity to your fullest, but to make the most of who you are and to be the best person that you can be. And I really think that so much of what we're going to get into today will really help open the eyes of people who think they've got so much figured out and think that the way they've been doing it is the way that it should be because it's the way that they've seen it or the way that they've gotten used to it. So I'm just really grateful you took the time to be on this show because I'm really excited about what we have to cover today. Truly am.
And I so appreciate your wisdom. I remember as my four children were younger, one instance in particular, I would say to them before I left and they were home alone, don't cook, do not use the stove. And then upon arriving home, I see a popcorn kernel on the floor. And I ask, did you have popcorn? No. Did somebody pop popcorn? No. I'm going to ask one more time. Who popped popcorn? And one of them raised the hand.
Mhm.
I did. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And then it was interesting. One would say, how did you know? And my response was, because I'm a mother.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And yeah, and what you were saying about the whole the crone that ceremony and everything, I mean, it's very, to me, I find my wife is Japanese, so I have, and I lived in Japan for like about 8 years. I go back very often. I have some really deep connections with Japan. And of course, the philosophy there and their approach to so much is so different than it is in the US and in, Western Europe and things in Europe and things like that. So, um, I kind of see a lot of the differences as opportunities for myself to learn more and to grow. But it's amazing to me, it's, as you are, the whole idea of growing and getting older, it's not something, it's something revered, it's something that is treated with so much more respect, I think, in Asian cultures and countries and outside of the Western society. And like you were saying, that even the hijacking of that word crone and how it's being used, it really signals to me that there's this stigma that really is somehow attached to growing older and wiser. And I was just wondering, in terms of your insight, where do you think a lot of that comes from, and why is it so different in European in Eurocentric societies? That understanding of wisdom and age.
Very good question, Curtis. We know that Aboriginal and Indigenous cultures embrace the aged
Yeah.
universally. There was a change in Euro-centric thought in an era where rationality became what was important. The mind became important, the body less so. The intellect became God. The intellect became worshipped. And when you don't attain a certain level of the standard that they set, then not only your age, but all the other dogmas that were created around the Eurocentric ideology from a strong point where the information could be disseminated in the times globally to be whatever they said it was. And then the rest became indoctrinated. Those who were affected became indoctrinated. And so not only that word, but a whole lot of other dogmas that I just boiled it down to that one word, the dogmas that we must face. If you don't even know they exist, you don't have anything to push against. When you just accept blindly what you've been taught, you don't struggle against it to find something better, something wholesome, or even go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
Because the intellect tells us this is not so, that this is primitive thinking, and
Mm.
we need to be removed. We need to move beyond that, whatever they said that is.
Yeah.
Is that simple enough?
Yeah, no, it is.
That's
And
my philosophy according to Mary.
yeah, no, that's beautifully said. And I think like you were saying, that awareness and the ability to question what is and not to accept the doctrine is so important. And you mentioned in your first book, in the introduction, you had mentioned in describing the book, you had mentioned the book as being your first book being "It's Over, I've Had It, Stop Calling Me a Girl," that you released in 2014. You mentioned it as a personal and theological journey, revealing how many well-meaning and educated people mindlessly accept some ancient biblical teachings, leading to despicable bigotry. And I was just curious, from your experience, what do you find to be the most common ignorant acts of bigotry that you see today? And what's one thing everyone can do to address and correct this behavior?
It took me through that journey to understand what was being taught, first of all.
Yeah.
And when I would press against what was being taught, because all of my education in the US and Canada, where I lived for 15 years, was Euro-centric, totally. Everything else was discounted. And I was usually the only female in my class studying for the ordained ministry. What I learned first of all was the teaching, that the assumption that God is male. And why do I say God is male? Because it's obvious God is male. If God created man in God's image and man has a penis and God has to look like a man who may have a beard, who has a certain body type and is white.
Mhm.
That was my image. Even before school, I grew up with that mentality.
Mhm.
And then learning that God made the man in God's image, even though there are two creation stories, the other creation story that's first is not even hardly read. Um, uh, in the first creation story is God made them in our image. Today we still don't know what them is, and we still don't know what our is. But there were assumptions made with the second story that God made man in God's image, and every culture has creation stories. This one was perpetrated globally because of the ability to disseminate written material
Mhm.
from Europe. And not only was man made in the image of God, God breathed God's life, breath into the man, which meant power, which meant a relationship, which meant a higher standard. A
Mhm.
higher standard than what? Women who were made from a rib. On my stage presentations, I would talk about this. And I
Mhm.
would say to professional people, looking at one in particular, because I see him white usually fidgeting in his seat. And when I'm finished talking about that subject, I said, would you like to come forward? And then there's an introduction. Was there something I said that you don't agree with? And the question would be, you mean you don't believe in the Adam and Eve story? And my response would be, well, you just refer to it as a story.
Mhm.
And then I would ask, do you believe that men have one less rib than women? They would always say, yes. I would look at the audience, I would look at the guest, and I would say, but that's not true. And even people who were in the medical profession, mostly men at that time, would simply, even though they knew that wasn't true, when the subject went to something theological or biblical, They took off their critical thinking caps and put it in a drawer someplace. And
Mm.
they would answer that question wrongly. And that happens in a whole lot of areas. We stop thinking when it comes to certain things that are called sacred because we were taught to.
Yeah.
Now we just say, don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next thing is that the woman who was made from the rib, why? So this man wouldn't be lonely. So that should be helpful for him. That's all. There was nothing in her. And even to the ability to have babies and the pain, of course, the ancients wouldn't understand that when they would sit around a fire, if you can imagine, ancient sitting and talking about the things of life that we still talk about, like who are we? Why are we here? And does it make a difference that we even exist? And then they'd say, well, how do we get here? And somebody would raise a hand and say, I know. And all eyes would turn to that one who would say, imagine that, well, put a hand up with a finger making a hole there and say, this finger went into that hole, that thing, and and over there, that person became fat and life dropped out. But how could they see,
Yeah.
ancient see, that the woman was a co-creator in the process? They
Mm.
could not see that.
Right. Right.
But how come still
Yeah.
we propagate the
Mm.
dogma that semen is the seed of life, that
Mm.
semen is foundational? We use that word all the time.
Mm. Yeah.
Seminal. I say when I attended seminary, I call it the seminary. When I went, women didn't go there to become pastors. We weren't allowed. I fought all the way through.
Yeah.
But that notion we know is not true, but we still act like it is, that women are only incubators.
Mm.
And my job, and those whose eyes have been awakened, we are to share that and help people understand that not only that one, like the word Crone, there's so much more that we have to understand, those things that have been holding us back.
Mm.
I have a twin brother. Well, he died 4 years ago, Michael. And Michael and I were, of course, very close. And in the 50s, we were born in 1950 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at the McGee Women's Hospital. And I know there weren't very many women's hospitals then whose job it was to focus on women's issues. So I applaud my mother and father for working with that hospital in particular. During that day, during that time, we had titles. Michael was Mr. Michael.
Mm.
I was Miss Mary. And when you write anything formal, we were addressed as such. And that was Euro-centric as well, because still in Europe today, titles are crucial to your wealth, to your education, to your power, towards your health, to where you live. And we simply just adopted,
Mm.
even though I know the US went through a revolution, but still don't realize how much of that has permeated society, not just in the US, but other cultures in the world.
Yeah.
I hated to be called Miss Mary. I hated even more that my brother was Master Michael, and I refused to call him Master Michael. Our division of labor was very well established. Like Michael took out the garbage.
Mm.
Mary cooked, which Mary hates to do. Mary's not good at it. Mary still doesn't cook. Michael cooked better than Mary. I remember the time when my mother and caught us. I wouldn't even say, I mean, caught us. It shouldn't have been caught, but we were playing house. I was the daddy and Michael was the mommy. And sometimes we interchanged all the time, unbeknownst to our parents. My mother saw this exchange and fussed at us and told us never to do that again. You are Miss, you are the mother. Michael is the daddy.
Mm.
I had to be taught that children don't know that.
Mm.
Another dogma that the genders, and that there are only two genders we were taught, have definite responsibilities, and one can't cross over. In school, I I don't know if you're familiar with the grading system, but it's from A to E or F for failing.
Mm.
I received a D minus in home ec. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be in wood shop. I wanted to be in the automotive shop. I wanted to learn those things, the mechanical stuff,
Mm.
but I could not because those were for boys.
Yeah.
And even driving, I remember my brother learned to drive before I did because it was thought that he needed to learn to drive before I would. Was that helpful?
Yeah, no, extremely, extremely. Yeah, and it makes me think too of just growing up, and I was lucky enough to be surrounded by and raised primarily by some very strong independent women. So I think I was lucky to, I think at a younger age, really start to question a lot of what, was taught in school, and even the way certain things were said and the way that people were portrayed in movies. And of course, I'm also black. So I had this whole combination of, okay, well, I don't think, I think there's a lot more to explore here. I think, what we're being presented with is really, not representing so much of what I knew. It was not representing. So I remember seeing things and think, man, they really, I can't see my mom playing a role like that because that role is too dumb for her, or that doesn't, she would never say anything like that, or she doesn't see the world like that. So I had that opportunity, I think, earlier, than maybe a lot of people, not only to, I think, start to question what was considered normal and the way things were being presented day to day outside of the house to me, but also really start to wonder about um, the whole. I wonder about how my identity fit in, because I would start to think, and I got this a lot, and my wife will even say, there's been a number of occasions that we've been out somewhere together or in the same place but separated, and some guy will come up and talk to me and assume that I'm homosexual. And I always think that is a compliment for me, because to me, I kind of think like, oh, wow, I have this breadth of ability to be perceived in so many different ways. And to
Yes.
me, that kind of made me feel like, oh, that means I'm relatable. That means maybe I'm not coming across as assuming, or I'm not coming across, um, I mean, I know it's kind of, it's overused, but toxic masculinity, just feeling as if I am not comfortable in my own skin if I'm thought of in a certain way. Like I never ever felt like, when situations like that would arise, that, weird. I was just like, oh, that was kind of, well, actually I'm not, but that's, this is actually my wife, but hey, and then I would introduce them, and it was, I mean, to me, it was an experience, and I never really thought much of it as something that meant anything else than being open and being accessible and being approachable. And yet, there's so much out there. And even I think today, they talk a lot about you can easily find information about what's being discussed as feminine versus masculine energy and identity, and I read lots of things because I'm interested, but I always start to get a little bit cautious whenever I'm being told that it's a confining situation, that it's something that defines who you are. Anything that kind of takes away freedom to be, to me, is something that I back away from and ask a lot of questions. And I think that what you're saying is just, I mean, it's these are really concrete examples of what is happening if you just take a look, if you pay attention and don't think of it as a challenge. Don't think of it as someone is trying to prove you wrong. All this person is just saying, why don't you just pay attention to the words you're using? Why don't you pay attention to the attitude you have when you walk into one room of people that look one way versus another room of people that look another? Just become aware of that. Just become aware of the language, the mannerisms, the assumptions, and things like that. And I think that's so important. I really do. And I love what you said. About a description about yourself, and you said that you see yourself as a citizen of the world, and you feel related to everyone, and you said, quote, "I am moved by neither fear, judgment, nor guilt fostered by institutional force and unnatural boundaries. My faith is freeing and my mind is open to possibilities which go beyond this realm." And I think that is so important. So I think it's beautiful, and I think it's so necessary.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And as I said before, it took a long time for me to understand because I didn't have mentors with the same mindset.
Yeah.
And we have, as you again said, there's so much information available now within reach that we need to take advantage of. I have one more dogma that I'd like to bring to
Please.
mind if I can. Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
The use of the word husband and wife,
Mm.
Euro-centric attitude. Even though we feel that some countries feel like Japan feels that there was no eucentricity in their country, the term husband used to mean a manager of anything.
Mm.
It came to mean manager of a household. Then it came to mean manager of a home. Then it came to mean manager of a wife. Because God gave man dominion over everything,
Mm-hmm.
the land, everything, in the water, everything, including women and girls. And husband, the word husband means manager. It's still used today, like animal husbandry.
Animal husbandry. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's what it means. So
Yeah.
when we apply it to our marital relationship, we are automatically, unconsciously or not,
Mhm.
we have delineated our partnership.
Yeah.
I am your manager. And at the altar, when those who've come before God and witnesses, the woman says, "You will be my manager for the rest of my life."
Mm.
And the man says, "Yes, I will be your manager for the rest of your life."
Yeah.
What other contract in the world does that exist?
Right.
Where? Other societies had relationships formed, different than the Euro-centric model. And we're told, you need to stop that. You need to do it our way, because our way is the right way. And our way needs to be the only way. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. And it's, oh my gosh, it's so true. It's so true. Especially when a lot of that influence came at gunpoint too, right? It was like, you will do it this way. I mean, it wasn't, and yeah, I mean, that's another perfect example, just the words that we use and the implications that they have and our, um, not being aware of. And and it's not just English. I mean, there's other languages as well. And it's funny, if you grow up, of course, learning English, of course you just assume, and then you have to become aware, to actually, start to see some of the ironies in the language and some of the assumptions that are built into the words. When you learn another language, and I'm sure you know this, as well, you're looking at the language from a different perspective because you have your own. So, I always find it, so interesting as someone, who, when you learn another language, like when I was learning Japanese, and perhaps you can relate to this as well, learning other languages, how the questions that you have, often catch the native speakers by surprise, because once you start to get the grammar down and you start to get the basics down, all of a sudden you start to notice things, and you want to make sure you use the words correctly, but something inside is like, this seems a little off, but maybe there's a reason, so let me ask. So, I think one example is, in Japanese, a lot of the characters, a lot of the words, there's a character, there's characters behind kanji characters that originated from China. So the characters have meaning. So if you start to get a gist of the meanings of the characters, and then you start seeing them combined, used for other words, you start to notice certain things. So, for example, there were words for, foreigner in Japanese, and and when we think of foreigner, we think of someone. In English, we think of someone perhaps from another country, but the characters used in Japanese, it doesn't, and they've worked on correcting this, but when I was growing up, and I was still like 19, 20 years old, 20, 21 years old in Japan, the characters that they used to describe a foreigner was someone from outside, basically. I mean, there wasn't, you couldn't, it was like you just belonged out there. So,
Yes,
and so when you ask the questions, it's like, huh, well, to a native speaker, like, I never thought about it that way. That's interesting. So, but this is kind of the perspective that we all need, right? Like you're saying, is
yes.
this awareness is so important, and we've got to step away and give ourselves some room to actually observe. And that takes patience, and it takes experiences to kind of bring that out. But it also seems like it's something we could perhaps teach ourselves to do, or at least train ourselves to be a little bit more, apt to use it, more often than we do. I think we go on autopilot, right, most of the time, and we just
That's
go
true.
and do what we do, right? But
That's how it has effect. That's why it's been so effective,
yeah,
because we stopped thinking.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And, this might actually be a good segue into, your next book, that you released in 2015, that you called Lifestyle Thoughts for Your Journey. And then you had mentioned in the description that from time to time, lightning bolts of inspiring thoughts to ponder are needed to inspire, motivate, and affirm. Illumination from unexpected sources can change your life. Lifestyle's random ruminations, which is about your book, are shared for your inspiration, personal growth, and success. So, again, I mean, I would imagine along your journey, you were seeing these things, and it was like, hey, here's some ways to be able to wake up and to start to see things differently. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe you could kind of give us some
Well,
background into
it's
that as
true.
well.
I, I learned some other dogma. For instance, I may have wanted to an answer to something, and I would simply open my Bible and point and see something. And I say, "Oh, that's good." Then I'd be told, That's witchcraft. You can't use the Bible that way.
Oh, wow.
And just if I said I was thinking something and I didn't, I really, I have an understanding or a sense that this isn't me thinking.
Mhm.
Well, you can't believe that because that's that's a demon.
Yeah.
And I went through life being restricted that I couldn't find nuggets of inspiration in places that it was freely given. It was there. And
Mm.
I was locked in and never comfortable. I learned that there were people who do divination, for instance, who have the, that stick that can find water, the dowager.
Right.
That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
people in my circle said, "Don't do that. That's evil." There wasn't anything
Yeah.
that was good, that was of use.
Mm.
I would often say things to people, and for a period of time, I decided I'm going to write these things down, and I just called them nuggets. That's all.
Mhm.
And after a while, I saw that hmm, these things might be more interesting and helpful for someone else. And it's not a book that you read from cover to cover. It's just some words, some images that if you feel like opening it the one day, you open it and you read it, and then you think about it. And
Mhm.
it's that simple.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
should appreciate information from wherever it comes.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I actually mentioned this in some of my other podcasts as well. It's if you are not allowing yourself to be open to what is out there that potentially maybe you don't understand, and regardless of its source, then it's, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. I mentioned, I can't remember where I read it, but someone, I remember reading that, some advice that I definitely took to heart, about humility, and saying how, you should, um, never be confident about what you know. You should be confident in your ability to learn something new.
Fabulous.
So just
Yes.
always stay humble and always keep your mind open.
I appreciate that.
Uh,
That's why my business, since it was first incorporated in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada in 1984, the title is Catch the Vision. Now, catch, we can be, somebody can teach us all they want, but
mm,
we have to take the active act of
mm,
taking it in and bringing it in and using it. We are active participants in our learning
mm,
and not just wait to be spoon fed.
mm.
And if you don't do that, if you remain spoon fed all the time, you always be easily led
Yeah.
and controlled.
Right, right, because you're relying on someone else's input to tell you, or to yeah, basically define for you what you need, what is essential, what is. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, if you have I mean, everyone needs a little bit of a glimpse of what is possible, but it's really, like exactly like you said, you have to reach for it, and you have to turn that, effort into a process, a daily process, and always continue to try to work towards that. I think that's so true. I think that's so true. Yeah. And in terms of, the, work that you're doing, especially with the Catch the Vision now, with all of your involvements. I know you're doing, you speak at all kinds of different organizations. I know, of course, that you're also very active, in human rights. You're very human rights. You're a human rights activist that's very active. What are some of the I guess the big, uh, nuggets that you are working towards, this year? What can people look forward to in the months ahead from you and everything that you're involved in?
Um, my vision is that there will be a global initiative,
Hmm.
Stop Calling Me Girl.
Yeah.
And that opens up a whole lot of other issues
Yeah.
when we realize that we have half of the world's population underserved, underrepresented, abused,
Right.
hurt, neglected. And that does a disservice for everyone.
Right.
Does a disservice for global health. It does a disservice in our efforts for environmental health. And we need to be global. I would like people to not to say there aren't any issues facing one's own country, in one's own neighborhood, in one's own family, even. I'm saying understand that those issues are the same globally and
Right.
that we are more powerful together than apart, which
Right.
is another way, if we're kept divided, that we are able to continue to be abused. That understanding that we are all equal partners in this. We all have something to give and to share. We all have gifts and talents that we should never negate in another person. It doesn't matter. I think if we handle uh, Stop Calling Me Girl as we find ways to realize how I may have been putting down my sister. I may have been neglectful of my neighbor, who
Mhm.
is a girl that all of my friends are of the same. Even I ask people who say they are inclusive, not even concerning the equality of women in the process, but who are your who are those you associate with in your business? Who are the leaders in your institution? Who
Right.
are the leaders? Is this a global issue or isn't it a global issue?
Right.
If it is, then we need to look globally and act globally and do something simple. And it's a I think the awareness it needs to be global, and that's where my focus is and is now at 73. So I don't, I hope that I have a longer years than I even think to be effective and that my voice will go forward. I even so appreciate the media that allows for videos, for instance, that I know my work will be carried on for as long as the media exists. And my books as well, they're in print. So I know that it's not just up to me and my body, this one little old 72-year-old crone and a 73-year-old crone. So I appreciate the opportunity to spread what I know, and hopefully I will share what I've been given by you and others as well as we work together in a global system instead of in our little corners.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I always try to remind myself that when I have these opportunities to share this, the wisdom of the guests that I have on the show, like you, you never know who's listening. You never know who is going through something or they are feeling a certain way and perhaps not feeling like they belong or not understanding how to look at things or even how to become more aware. It may just be a feeling. It may just be I feel off. I don't feel right. I don't know what to do. But just the opportunity to be able to share that not only are the struggles that so many people are going through, more pervasive than they probably are aware individually, but also there are things that they can do that will help kind of alleviate that feeling of feeling alone, and to also, there are also things that they can do to help uh, kind of ease that discomfort, and actually use it as a tool, as something that they can actually grow from. And it is, the message, the feeling is not to be ignored. It's something that definitely needs to be addressed, but hopefully they'll hear something that will help them process that feeling, and be able to get out there and integrate better with their, their peers, or with their family, or with their friends, or at least to see the world in a way that isn't so overwhelming, or us versus them, which is really that itself, and divisive, of course. Which, of course, all of those things are so, especially for younger people. I mean, they're just so limiting, and it's very easy to get stuck in your own little world. With I mean, media has some great, like we're talking about, sharing these videos. I mean, this is available for all. And then on the other side, if you're not careful, you can end up, of course, just seeing what other people are saying that, sounds like what you may have said in the past, and then you're kind of stuck in this vision that this is the world, and this is, right, because look, they're all saying the same thing. And I think that's also important to remember. And just like you were saying about your experiences, living in different states and different countries, you've lived in Hawaii as well. So you definitely have had all of these different opportunities to see the world through, different lenses, and kind of appreciate the uniqueness of the people and the cultures, and the places that you've been. And that's such a great way to continue to expand your awareness, and to keep moving forward in a positive way as well. And I and also definitely wanted to get into, I think your latest book describes what can happen if we don't, right? Your book that you released in June, just a couple of months ago, The Seamstress, a Dystopian Tale. And in that story, of course, you are addressing very clearly the ills of Eurocentricity and corruption, and of the corruption of the monetary system, and religiousness, all of these things, human sexuality, and other issues that are very pertinent in today's society. And you're it's a great insight. It's a great way to look at, hey, if we're not addressing these things now, this is where we're headed. So I definitely wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that as well, because I think that's a great way to just kind of, and I love how your books, they're all taking different angles, right? They're all helping people understand the urgency, but giving you, one is kind of is pointing out, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is happening. The other is, here's some ways to keep you moving forward, keep you in a positive mindset, keep you growing. And then the other one is, and if you don't, this could happen. So, definitely take this into consideration. So I thought that was a nice trilogy, if you will, the way that you staged all of that. But
And I appreciate your insight as well. You have a depth of um, a caring. You're a visionary. I see that your intellect is not what drives you. It's that your intellect is put in a proper place so that you can use it as a tool and not as a weapon. And I appreciate that so much, Curtis.
well, yeah, I definitely, I think it's such a wonderful opportunity to just have, to be able to just I just, I mean, you've probably heard this before, and so many people have used terms like being forever a student, or a childlike mind, that mindset. And I try to remind myself that I think it's very easy for people, like you said, to use that intellect as a weapon and may not even be realizing it. But you're driven to what you think success will be, and you have these goals, and you think then it's going to be, then I will have arrived. And I always think about. I have two beautiful daughters. My oldest is in high school, and since before she turned one, you could not get her to stop running. She learned to walk very early. She loves to run. And she would run and run and run and run. And we would always say, "Stop running, Alyssa, stop running." And then, she would go, they had these events where, they had these like field day type events that they had. And she would run, and, people would be like, "Wow, she's so fast. She should, maybe we should look into getting her into track and field." And then she got involved in that. And she was having fun, and she was running, and she was winning all these races. And then it was like, "Oh, maybe you should get involved in the, junior USA track and field, the more
Ooh,
formal stuff." And she started running in that, and she was doing great. And then she started having heavier and heavier competition as she came into high school, and she wasn't winning all the time. She was, not winning most of the time. And she got really discouraged for a while. And I started to realize, the joy was in the process. She loved to run, and at some point, we took running and we turned it into an objective. We turned it into something she could use. And if she was using it well, then it would be meaningful and it would be important. And I think once we realized that, it was just kind of like, you take the joy out of the process, and you start weaponizing the intellect, the skill, the muscles, whatever it is. You're using it as a means to an end. You're never going to get there, but you're always going to feel like you're missing something, and you will have lost the joy in the journey. And luckily, she's gotten it back. And I always try to remind her that you do this because you like it. Nobody has any expectations of you to do anything but the best that you can do. And that's all we want for you. So I think it's so important to try to always keep that in mind. And when you start to get that feeling that you're doing something because you want something else besides becoming a better you, then it's something you need to really kind of make sure that you're not letting run away with you. And it gets hard. It's hard. It's hard being bombarded with, I think, people always telling you what you need and what success looks like, and you end up trying to chase all of these things. And even today, it's so easy, with media. You have a video out, and it's how many likes you get on Instagram or whatever. And those algorithms, they treat different creators based on these likes that are these clicks. So it can be hard to really just stay true to the process and enjoy it for what it is. But I definitely encourage everyone to do that, because that's, at the end of the day, that's all there is. That's who you are. And I really enjoy I think just having the opportunity to learn more about the world and about what I can do in it to do the best that I can. And today is a beautiful example. I get to have this conversation with you, which I'm also, of
oh,
course, so grateful to have the opportunity. So thank you.
you're welcome. And I appreciate when you said earlier that times when you feel a little uneasy,
Mm,
those are the times we need to stop
yeah.
and stay in it a while and not dismiss it and not be in a rush to just say, oh, well, and go to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's what you did with your daughter.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it's something that I think people need to be, at least for myself, I had to kind of condition myself to stop and be in that discomfort because it's so tempting just to want to get out from under it, and just go, oh, that feels off. I don't like that. I'm not going to do that anymore. Or I'm not going to sit there with that because it just, I just don't like that feeling. I remember reading there's somewhere that they had done these tests with people and they can put them in a room and say, okay, sit here for 30 minutes or something, and or you can shock yourself and leave the room whenever you want. And it's like people choose they just anything but being with themselves. It's like, I don't want to, no, I don't want that much time by myself. I just get me out of here.
Let me out of here.
So, but yeah, but as a conditioning for me, it was okay. That's just, I feel that's uncomfortable, or I'm not sure how to phrase this question. That means there must be something there because I'm struggling with trying to figure out how to get my point across, or how to, ask something, or there's something I'm not getting that I really need clarification on. Or something that I've been avoiding that I really should learn, that I've been, looking for any excuse to get away from. So, yeah, I do
Yes.
take those feelings seriously.
Yes, I can see. And that's the purpose of my book, is to take us to a place where we are uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll sit there and brood over it and think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so important. It's so necessary. So I'm just so happy that you've shared with everyone, these wonderful works, and especially this most recent book as well, to really, give people that opportunity. And your books, they're
They can go to my
okay.
website.
Your website. Okay. Okay. So your website, and I'll put all of this in the summary as well, but catchthevisionnow.com, is that the best website for people to find you?
Yes.
All right. Well, awesome. Awesome. Well, I hope that this conversation has really, I'm sure it has, but, I really sincerely hope that it's resonated with so many people out there who, are living the day to day and not either feeling like they're missing something, feeling unfulfilled, feeling uncomfortable and not knowing why. All these things are okay. And I think that hopefully, what we've talked about today will really help people not dismiss that feeling and really explore it and to grow from it. And thank you again for being such a wonderful and gracious guest. And we usually end our podcasts with a challenge we call it the daily challenge. It's not as intimidating as it sounds, but it's one thing I usually ask our guests for if there's one thing that you would recommend that our audience start doing today or try to do from today moving forward. What would that one thing that you recommend they do be?
Okay. Just last week, a friend in Hawaii, actually, he wanted to encourage me about something I was doing. And he said, "You go, girl." And another person who had read my book, "Stop Calling Me Girl,"
Yeah.
she responded to his post saying, "Don't call her girl." And I I explained that the reference, the context is everything,
Yeah.
and that my emphasis is on professional settings and how people perceive a woman, and not put her in a lower place,
Yeah.
and that uh, I know that there was no harm intended here.
Yeah.
I would challenge people to, when you see or hear someone not necessarily being referred to as girl, but being treated as less,
Mm,
even in a restaurant,
mhm,
calling a waitress server girl,
mhm,
or the working woman on the street, calling
mhm,
her girl,
mm,
or the pole dancer as a
mhm,
girl, the
mhm,
bartender as if she's a woman, as a girl.
Yeah.
Those are obvious things. Stop doing that. If you do it, stop doing it.
Right.
If you don't do it and you hear other people, ask them,
Yeah.
don't do it. Don't do that. And the same way when you see one treated as less
Yeah.
professional, somebody as someone who is grown,
Yeah.
don't refer to her as girl.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful advice. And it just made me think of one thing, like you were saying about, for example, the bartender or, the flight attendants or whoever. I remember correcting someone, and saying, server, and I was like, server, no, 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 she's a server. Everybody's a server because the male or female, they're servers, and and the guy said, well, everybody says waitress, and I just said, yeah, but just because everybody's saying it, does that mean that you can't question whether or not it makes sense or not? And he's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. So definitely, I totally think what you're saying is great. People point it out. Don't just be a bystander. If you see these things, you've got a voice, and definitely use it, and be aware of yourself as well. Really observe yourself. I think that's all wonderful advice. So thank you so much for sharing that, Mary, and thanks again for being a guest on our podcast, on the
And
Manifest
it
Your
was my
Greatness
pleasure.
podcast. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Manifest Your Greatness podcast. If you liked what we've explored on this episode, then you'll love the Manifest Your Greatness coaching program. The Manifest Your Greatness coaching program is uniquely tailored to help support you on your journey to become the absolute best version of yourself. So if you are committed to taking the steps required to significantly and permanently level up in any area of your life, visit manifestyourgreatness.com/contact. Again, that's manifestyourgreatness.com/contact and schedule your free consultation call today. Talk soon.